Welcome to our discussion on principles of economics once again. Today, what we'll do, we'll discuss the gains from trade. If you recall, in one of our previous sessions, we were discussing about comparative advantage, absolute advantage, and then how two individuals can engage themselves or two countries can engage themselves in mutually beneficial trade. And then we said that trade can actually make everyone better off. So, if you recall, we said that a country will export that particular commodity in which the country has comparative advantage. And what is comparative advantage? Basically, the lower opportunity cost of production. So, if you recall, we are talking about wheat and computer in the context of United States and Japan, right? Now, today's class is basically to understand the impact of government intervention on trade, how that will change the welfare of both the countries, right? In our previous sessions, we discussed another implication of government policy. We are talking about taxation. Using simple demand and supply, we analyze the impact of taxation. Same demand and supply tool we are going to use to understand certain government interventions in the context of international trade, right? That is what we are going to do today. So, a country has a comparative advantage if the country is producing that good with lower opportunity cost, right? So countries can gain from trade if each exports the good in which they have comparative advantage. That is what we have explained. Now we will apply the tools of welfare economics. Welfare economics, what are the tools? Basically, we will take demand, supply, and then the major important tools that is there in welfare economics is basically the consumer surplus and producer surplus. Why they are the tool of welfare economics? Because look at our definition of social welfare. We define social welfare as the summation of consumer surplus and producer surplus. And then in the context of trade, we explain what is the cost of taxation. Cost of taxation in the form of deadweight loss. So that means without government intervention, market was allocating the resources efficiently. And we said that competitive market equilibrium is social welfare maximizing. The moment government intervened in the form of taxation, it created deadweight loss. So we are going to use same tools of welfare economics, basically the consumer surplus and producer surplus, to understand what will happen to this consumer and producer surplus and to social welfare when the government intervene in the context of international trade. So we assume that PW is the world price of a good. There are two markets we are considering. When one is domestic market, another one is world market. But when the countries are engaging in trade, please remember that the only price which is relevant, that is the world price, because the sellers won't sell the product in domestic market if the world price is higher than the domestic market. Similarly, buyers won't buy anything from the domestic market if the good is available at the world market at a cheaper rate. So that means the only relevant price when the countries are engaged in free trade, that is PW, the world price of goods and services. And PD is the domestic price without trade, right? So if PD is less than PW, what will happen? So that means the good is available at a cheaper rate in domestic market than the world market. So what will happen when PD is less than PW? Country has actually comparative advantage in the good. Suppose India is producing rice or wheat, and wheat price in India is cheaper than that is available on the world market. That means probably India has lower opportunity costs of producing the good. That means India has a comparative advantage. Otherwise, it was not possible for India to produce the good at a lower price, right? Because price has a link with the cost of production, and we are talking about opportunity cost. So under free trade, country exports the good, right? PD is less than PW. So what I said earlier, if a higher price is available in the world market, producer of wheat will export the wheat in the world market. They are not going to sell the product in domestic market, right? So this is the condition. When the world price is higher than the domestic price, then the country will export the commodity in the world market. Similarly, when PD is higher than PW, that means buyers won't buy from here. So goods should be imported from the world market. Countries does not have comparative advantage, so it is better that the country imports the commodity from the world market. Under free trade, country imports the good. That is what we say. So we are assuming the small economy assumption. So a small economy means what I discussed earlier is a price taker in the world market, right? So that means that country's action cannot influence the world price. That is the meaning of a price taker small economy. It may not be always true if the country size is huge. For example, the US, it basically can influence the world market. Even China can influence the world market. But we are assuming that to keep the things simple, once we understand the nitty gritties, then we can actually relax this assumption, right? That is the idea. When a small economy engages in free trade, PW is the only relevant price. The reason we have already explained. No seller would expect a price which is lower than PW. No buyers would pay a price which is higher than PW. Right? So this is the meaning that in free trade, PW is the only relevant price. So now let us consider a product which is soybean. So soybean's demand and supply, and this is the equilibrium price and quantity. When price is $4, then soybean 500 units, might be kg, might be quintal, might be ton. Okay, that is how it is decided. Now what will happen if the world price is $6? So that means when the country is engaged in trade, 4 is not relevant no longer. $4 price which was prevailing earlier, that is no longer relevant. So world market is higher than the domestic market, and countries should actually export. At price 6, actually what is happening, the suppliers are willing to supply this much, but the demand, that means buyers are ready to buy only this much, there is excess supply. What will happen to that excess supply? Obviously, suppliers will export soybean into the domestic market, sorry, world market. So this is at $6, the total production of soybean is 750 units, but the domestic buyers are buying only 300 units. So the remaining 750 minus 300, 450 units of soybean will be exported to the world market. That is the export, right? That is the export. So now we will understand using this simple demand and supply tool, when free trade is allowed, who is getting the gain? That means who is gaining, who is losing out of this free trade. So we are assuming there are only buyers and suppliers in the world market. So we will be using the tool of consumer surplus and producer surplus pre and post situation of free trade. What was the total surplus in the pre-trade situation? What is the total surplus in the post-trade situation? So for understanding, we have denoted several areas by name A, B, C and D. Now let us talk about without trade. What is the consumer surplus? As you can understand, consumer surplus is the area above the price line below the demand curve. So obviously, before trade, $4 was the relevant price which was there in the domestic market. If you take area above the price line below the demand curve, then A plus B, that is the total consumer surplus. A plus B. And what is the producer surplus? That is the area given by C. Okay. So total surplus is then A plus B plus C. Now what will happen? Can you think of when the price goes to $6? So that means when the free trade is introduced, price of soybean has increased from 4 to 6. So obviously producers are getting a larger market. So by applying common sense, we can understand there would be an increase in producer surplus and there would be a fall in consumer surplus, because at that price some of the consumer will leave the soybean market. Existing customers, they will buy less soybean. Similarly, from the producers, some new producers will enter into the market. Existing producers may supply more. So we expect producer surplus to go up. Let us see what is happening. With trade, what is the consumer surplus? Now this is the relevant price, 6. So area above the price line below the demand curve. So this region A is a consumer surplus. Earlier it was A plus B. Now it is A. So that means there is a reduction in consumer surplus. What is happening to producer surplus? Look at this. Earlier the producer surplus was how much? The area C. Right? Price below the price line, above the supply curve. That was how producer surplus was defined. Now, in free trade, when price goes to 6, so the total producer surplus is C plus B plus D. Right? So total surplus is then A plus B plus C plus D. Now, if you compare the pre and post situation, obviously in the pre situation total surplus was only A plus B plus C, and now the total surplus is A plus B plus C plus D. So that means this is the net gain from trade. And who is gaining? This part is going to the producer surplus part, right? This is the gain from trade, and this is the gain for the producers. Now, if you think about, we said the trade makes everyone better off. Now, is that principle true? Can I say that trade makes everyone better off? Here I see buyers are losing, only exporters, sellers are gaining. Yes, that assumption is still valid, because here, when I say everyone, we are not considering two individuals. Rather, we are considering the two countries. Right? So, and the assumption is that the gainers actually will distribute the gain to the other party who is losing. Okay? The other party who is losing. So this is another application in the context of plasma TV. Same thing, I am not going to repeat this. Earlier this was just reverse. So earlier the world price is, Earlier the price was 400, 300, 3000, and now it has gone down to 1500. What will happen in the world market? This is the price. So obviously, if something is available at a cheaper rate, then what will happen? Country will import, because that means country has a higher cost of production for plasma TV. Country, the domestic country, the small domestic country doesn't have comparative advantage. So that means the country will import. So under free trade, how many TVs will the country import and export? Look at. This is the demand, 600 units, but sellers are supplying only this much. So remaining 400 units has to be imported. So under free trade, domestic consumers demand 600, but domestic suppliers, they produce only 200, remaining 400 is the import. Okay, remaining 400 will be the import. So direction of trade, what is happening? The export will happen when the domestic price is less than world price. Import will happen when the domestic price is higher than this. So when export happens, consumer surplus falls. When import happens, consumer surplus rises. You can go back and check. Okay, this is how you are importing. So that means earlier your consumer surplus was this, right? But now, because of earlier this was the price, valid price, $3,000. Now you are importing from the world market. So your consumer surplus is price above the price line, below the demand curve, so entire area. Okay, so that means there is a gain in consumer surplus, but there is a fall in producer surplus. Earlier this was the area, but now only this small triangle is the producer surplus. So there is a fall. We can understand that in case of import, then in case of import, what is happening? Consumer surplus rises, but producer surplus falls. Okay, so total surplus in both the cases, whether you export or import, total surplus is actually more in case of free trade rather than the without trade situation. Okay, so trade creates winners and losers. That is what we have to keep in mind. Even though total surplus is rising, one party is losing, another party is gaining. And the idea is, why trade can make everyone better off? The gainers will distribute some of their gain to the losers, but the gains exceed the losses. That is the assumption. What are the other benefits of international trade? Consumers enjoy increased variety of goods. Obviously, when the world market is available, now you can understand in today's eras of globalization, we are getting a variety of products. The good what is produced within in India, that is available in any case. Other than Indian products, all other products produced in the China, Japan, United States, so on and so forth, everything is available. Okay, so that's why when there is free trade, consumers they enjoy increased variety of goods and services. And when you have a bigger basket to select, then the consumer's utility or satisfaction goes up. You can easily understand. Suppose you want to buy some products, you are there in a shop, small shop where only limited items are available. Even though you will buy the same item, when you go to the supermarket, by looking at the variety of products, it's not that you are going to buy everything, but consumer prefers to select his or her product from a variety of options available. No one wants a restricted situation for consumption. That is why trade makes a, a bigger market, a bigger variety of goods and services available to the consumer, and that is how consumers enjoy increased level of utility or satisfaction. Producers also, they get a bigger market to sell their product. At the same time, competition from abroad may reduce market power of domestic firms, which will increase total welfare. So when there is competition in free trade, so domestic producer may get lower market power. Earlier, they might be enjoying the some kind of monopoly power in the market, as a result of which they might be enjoying higher price. Consumers were paying higher price before trade. Now, since there is competition, so they have to now reduce their price, and that will increase total welfare. So trade enhances the flow of ideas, facilitates the trade of technology around the world. So you might be hearing about the argument in favor of foreign direct investment, FDI. What is FDI? FDI is basically foreign direct investment. Foreign companies are either investing directly on Indian companies, or they might be setting up their own plants in the domestic country. Whatever might be the case, in case of trade, that means there is a flow of idea. It facilitates the spread of technology around the world. That is what is happening here. So if trade makes everyone better off, then why all the opposition to trade? You see, many a times there is a huge protest against free trade. Why this is so? So trade can make everyone better off. The winners from trade could compensate the losers and still be better off. That is the assumption we make. Even though one country is losing, even though some of the customers are losing, okay, when you think about at the country level, then everyone is better off, both the countries. But when you are thinking within the country, exporters are getting the benefit, importers are losing. So what will happen? The idea is, what we assume, that even though trade creates a group of winners and a group of losers, winners gain from trade exceeds the gain losers loss from the trade, and the winners can redistribute some of their gain to the losers and be still better off. However, such compensation rarely occurs. Okay, such compensation rarely occurs. The losers are often highly concentrated among a small group of people who feel them acutely. For example, in case of what I said, in case of imports, when foreign goods are entering into domestic market, domestic producers may lose their competitive advantage. They were earlier enjoying higher profit, so they may lose. And that loss is concentrated only among few sellers of the product. But in case of export, the gain is spread across many consumers. So, as an individual consumer, I may not even realize that I am enjoying some gain from the trade. So, when the loss is concentrated among few sellers, few domestic sellers, what they will do, they will try to formulate some kind of, try to form some kind of lobby, and they will put some kind of pressure on the government. They will go protesting for free trade. So they will protest against free trade actually. So gains are often spread thinly over many people. They, as a single consumer, they may not realize this. Hence, the losers have more incentive to organize and lobby for restrictions on trade. Okay, but the consumers, since there are many in number of consumers, that type of lobby formation doesn't happen among infinite number of buyers. Okay, that is how we get protests mainly from the people who incur losses. So now, when there is protest, what will happen? They may convince government to impose some kind of restriction on free trade. And one such restriction is tariff. So that means if importers are importing, when the goods are imported from foreign country, government will impose some amount of tax on that imported products and price will go up. Then the domestic producers can compete with the foreign product. You understand what I'm saying? Earlier, the price of the domestic producers were higher than the world price. So goods were getting imported. How will you prevent such imports? There are protests and they convince the government to impose some amount of tax on the imported product. Price of the imported product will go up, and now the domestic producers can compete with the international producers, right? Let us see how does it happen and what is the implication on consumer and producer surplus when tariff is imposed. That means a tax on imported goods. So we are taking the example of cotton shirts. Let us say that world price is $20 and a tariff is imposed on $10 per shirt. Consumers now must pay $30 for an imported shirt. So domestic producers can charge 30 per unit. Let's say earlier it was 25 and PW is 20, so they cannot compete. Once the tax is imposed, either it would be at least equal or more than the price, or that imported shirts price would be more than the domestic producer's price. So now they can enjoy the comparative advantage of lower price for the product. In general, the price facing domestic buyers and sellers would be PW plus T. So world price plus the tax amount. That is the relevant price. Now use this simple diagram of demand and supply and let us see what would be the consequence of this tax on imported shirts. So this is the price earlier, $20, right? World price is $20. So at the world price $20, see, suppliers can supply only this much, but there is a huge demand for cotton shirts. So what will happen? The excess demand what is there in the market means there will be import. To satisfy the excess demand, there will be import of cotton shirt. Okay, buyers demand 80, but sellers can sell up to 25. So 80 minus 25, those remaining units will be imported. 55 units of cotton shirts. Right? Now, what is happening? Tax is imposed, price is going up to $30. Right? So, now see what is happening. So, when price goes to 30, demand falls, supply increases. So the gap between demand and supply is now 70 minus 40, which is 30 units. So earlier it was 55. Now import it is only 30. So using this diagram, we need to now analyze who is losing, who is gaining, right? So can you think about in this situation when $10 of tax is imposed per cotton shirt. So now apart from consumer and producer, there is a third player, government, right? Whenever tax situation is considered, so that means there are three players, producer, consumer and government. So before we talk about consumer and producer surplus in the pre and post tax situation on imported product, so what is the total tax revenue that you are generating for the government? Can you think about from this diagram? What is the revenue that government is generating from this tariff? It is very simple. The revenue is equals to tariff per unit of shirt multiplied by total number of shirts imported, right? So which is 30, 70 minus 40, 30 multiplied by the tax. So basically tax is 10. So this entire area of the rectangle is the tax revenue. This entire area is the tax revenue. Now see what is happening to the consumer and producer surplus. So we have given different name. In case of free trade, so the relevant price is this. So that means what is the consumer surplus? Price above the area above the price line and below the demand curve. You can easily understand consumer surplus is earlier it was A, B, C, D, E and F. This was the earlier situation, that means before imposition of tariff. That time price was $20. So price is 20 means the entire area above the price line below the demand curve, A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay, that was the consumer surplus. And what was the producer surplus? Area above the supply line below the demand curve, that means only this area, G. Producer surplus is only G. And total surplus is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Very easy to understand. Now you increase price from 20 to 30. Consumer surplus will be only A plus B. Look at this. Consumer surplus is only A plus B because the area above the price line below the demand curve is the consumer surplus, A plus B. What is the producer surplus? Producer surplus is now C plus G. Okay, so that means there is a reduction in consumer surplus, there is an increase in producer surplus. And what is the tax revenue? As I told you, area of this rectangle. Very simple to understand. Tax rate multiplied by the total quantity imported. So, if you recall the concept of deadweight loss earlier, there is a gain for the government, but government is not able to capture the entire fall in consumer surplus, right? Entire fall in consumer surplus is not going to the government's pocket. Rather, this area, this D and F, look at this. This is getting lost actually. And this is called deadweight loss. Now, what is the reason for this deadweight loss? That we have to think, and this is little tricky here. So there are two components of the deadweight loss, D and F. See, if you think about the F component, earlier consumers were buying 80 units. After imposition of tariff, they are buying only 70 units. So that means some consumers left and existing consumers, they are buying less amount, and that is why they are losing from their consumer surplus. Now, what about this D part? See, producers are actually supposed to produce up to 25 units. But just because we are giving external support, producers are gaining some artificial comparative advantage. So the efficient level of production should have been here. Just because we are pushing them, we are protecting them from the foreign market by imposing tariff. Production has gone up beyond the efficient level of production. That is the reason. So deadweight loss D is basically overproduction. Now, why do you think this is overproduction? Overproduction, in a sense, you are able to produce that much with government support. Otherwise, your efficient level of production is only here. That overproduction is causing one component of the deadweight loss. Okay? And AF is basically underconsumption due to underconsumption observed. Okay? So, overproduction, neither overproduction nor underconsumption. Nothing is actually desirable for the welfare of the economy or the society. That is why this imposition of tax or tariff, this we can understand as the social cost of tariff D plus F, the entire amount of deadweight loss. There are another way by which we can restrict the trade, which is import quota. That means quantitative limit on imported good. So mostly has the same effect as tariff, right? So it raises price, reduces quantity of imports, reduces buyers' welfare, increases sellers' welfare. So a tariff creates revenue for the government, a quota creates profits for the foreign producers of the imported goods. Okay, some amount of item now produced, foreign producers can import actually, import quota. So that means I am distributing, let's say India wants to import 100 shirts. I am allocating, I am saying, okay, country A can import this much, country B can sell this much into domestic market. So this is how the quota has been decided, import quota, right? So India will decide that this year only this many amount of shirts will import. That's all. We are putting a restriction on import. So it will give you almost same result. Earlier there was no quantity restriction, only tariff was imposed. Now quantity itself is regulated. Okay. Government could auction licenses to import to capture this profit as a revenue. Usually it does not. So that means if there are 5 importers from the country, so they have to get the license from the government first of all to import the product and sell it to domestic market. Government can generate, but generally they don't. Sometimes they do. Okay, it will have the same impact, right? The tariff. So this is all about application of government policy. We have understood particularly the tariff and quota on the social welfare using the simple tool of consumer and producer surplus. We understood that what will happen when the tariff is imposed. So basically, trade makes everyone better off, but there are losers, there are gainers. We assume that those who gain from trade, they will share some of the gain to the losers. But that compensation generally doesn't happen. So that is why so much of protest. And who protest? Basically, the sellers. Because the loss is concentrated only a few number of sellers. And it is easy to organize few people. But gains from trade, basically is distributed among many consumers, and I don't even realize whether I am actually gaining something from that trade, right? So with this, we are closing our discussion today. Thank you.